August 8th, 1963, just after midnight, a Royal Mail train cut through the darkness of the English countryside, moving south from Glasgow to London. It carried no passengers, made no announcements, and rarely stopped. Its purpose was simple: move money quietly while Britain slept. Inside one unmarked carriage were dozens of sealed mailbags filled with cash. No labels, no guards. Just routine. By today's value, the cargo was worth more than 60 million, nearly 80 million. At the controls sat Jack Mills, a veteran train driver who had run this route countless times. Every signal, every curve of track, every mile of countryside was familiar. Then something happened that made no sense. At a remote crossing, miles from any town, a signal ahead turned red. It wasn't supposed to. That signal almost never stopped trains, especially not at that hour. But railway rules were absolute. A red signal meant only one thing: stop. Mills applied the brakes. Steel screamed against steel as hundreds of tons of metal slowed in the darkness. And in the middle of nowhere, the Royal Mail train came to a complete halt. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then men stepped out of the dark. Not running, not shouting, walking calmly toward the engine. This wasn't chaos, it was control.
It was a brilliant crime because of the planning, because of the business of stopping the train at one point, cutting off the guard, take away the engine and two carriages.
Train robberies were supposed to be a thing of the past, especially in modern Britain, especially against government postal trains. The Royal Mail system was built on predictability. Trains ran on fixed schedules, routes rarely changed. Procedures were repeated night after night without variation. There were no armed guards, no police escorts, no emergency alarms linked directly to law enforcement. Security came from habit, and habit creates blind spots. The men on the tracks understood that better than anyone. When the attackers reached the locomotive, everything happened fast. The cab door opened, two men climbed inside. Jack Mills barely had time to react before he was struck and knocked to the floor. His assistant, David Whitby, tried to intervene and was quickly restrained. No guns were drawn, no threats shouted. Authority didn't come from weapons, it came from preparation. Outside, other members of the gang moved into position. Communication lines were cut. The train was disabled just enough to delay pursuit. Another group headed straight for their target. The high-value package carriage, they didn't search for it. They already knew. The HVP carriage looked ordinary from the outside. No special markings, no extra security. Inside, it carried cash transfers between banks and post offices across the country. Most nights, the sums were large. On this night, they were exceptional. Postal workers froze. There was no training for a hijacked train. No emergency protocol, no precedent. The attackers forced open the carriage and began removing mailbags, carefully, selectively. They knew exactly which bags mattered. That knowledge didn't come from luck. It came from inside information. Months earlier, far from the railway tracks, a different kind of planning had taken place. In London, a small group of criminals began discussing an idea that sounded impossible. At the center of those conversations was Bruce Reynolds. Reynolds wasn't violent. He wasn't reckless. What made him dangerous was patience. He believed the most valuable thing in Britain wasn't money, it was routine. Through contacts that were never officially confirmed, Reynolds gained access to a devastating secret. A senior Royal Mail security officer, whose identity remains unknown, revealed that a specific carriage on the Glasgow-London route carried exceptionally large cash shipments on certain days. Even worse, it was lightly protected. That moment turned an idea into a plan. Reynolds and his associates were seasoned criminals, but they had never robbed a train. So they brought in help. A disciplined, experienced group known as the South Coast Raiders, men familiar with rail systems and precision timing. Together, they agreed on one unbreakable rule: no guns. Not for moral reasons, for strategy. Firearms would escalate the response. Without them, the crime would initially be treated as robbery, not terrorism. They rehearsed, studied routes, timed response windows, learned how long it would take for alarms to be raised. They weren't planning a robbery, they were planning control. The red signal that stopped the train wasn't an accident. It had been manually rewired. Instead of destroying the system, the gang altered it, forcing obedience without suspicion. It was one of the boldest moves of the entire operation, and it worked. The entire operation lasted less than an hour. Mailbags were moved into waiting vehicles. The train was left disabled but intact. No shots were fired, but one moment changed everything. Jack Mills was struck harder than intended. The injury would later spark public outrage and turn opinion sharply against the robbers. What had begun as a clean crime now had a victim. By the time authorities arrived, the attackers were gone. Britain woke up to an unthinkable headline. A Royal Mail train had been robbed. The gang believed the hardest part was over. They were wrong. They regrouped at a remote farmhouse, a decision that would destroy them. Instead of destroying evidence, they relaxed. They handled the money. They played games. They left fingerprints on plates, bottles, and the cash itself. Serial numbers on banknotes were already being tracked. Within days, police closed in. Arrests followed. Some fled the country. Some were caught quickly. Some turned on each other. Bruce Reynolds escaped, but not forever. Years later, he was captured and imprisoned. The Great Train Robbery changed Britain forever. Postal security was rewritten. Rail systems were redesigned. Predictability was treated as a threat. The crime became legend, not because it succeeded, but because it revealed how fragile trusted systems really are. No guns, no alarms, no force, just information, patience, and one red signal that should never have existed.